Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Fearless Artist Podcast. My name is Michelle Lynn, and today I'm so excited to have my new friend, Nick Akhtoff from The Wise Musician on Instagram. Welcome, Nick.
Great to be with you, Michelle. Amazing. Thanks so much for having me.
Today's a big day because we're going to be talking through your huge account, which has a massive following you've amassed over the last few years, 250,000 Instagram followers, because you post amazing content of musicians all over. And I'll let you obviously explain that. And I think so many people have found your page, been inspired by that. And you, up till now, have not revealed who's behind all of this. So today we're introducing you to your audience and we're going to talk a little bit about why you started, what keeps you going, and yeah, how it is for you to manage something this big.
Great, great. Yeah, small correction. I'm at 225 right now,
Oh,
so I hope to get to 250. Hopefully, we'll get to 250, but yeah.
okay, cool. Let's start with your origin story. I always like to hear a little bit. So you're a bassoon player.
Yeah, bassoon player I've been playing for, since I'm about 12 years old. For high school, I went to this place called Idlewild Arts Academy in California, which is like a private arts high school. So it's like a boarding school where you live there and you study music full time.
Whew,
So that changed my life because, the level was extremely high
yeah,
compared to what I was coming from, and people graduating from there were going to, like, Curtis, Juilliard, like, all the good schools, so, like, it instantly raises your level to just be around people that are better than you,
yeah.
so that's what it was for me at that stage, and so, yeah, then I went to Rice University after that, and then went to Yale, and then I went over to Germany for 2 years and studied at the Hans Eisler Hochschule in Berlin for 2 years, which was amazing. Just in California now, do, freelancing chamber music. I played with this group called the Kaleidoscope Chamber Orchestra for a while. They're largely moved out of California at this point, but, it was a pandemic casualty kind of.
Oh man,
But playing with them, that was a conductorless orchestra in California, which was great, and I was part of the artistic team on that group, so we were, like, deciding which repertoire we're gonna play, who would play with us. We had concerto competitions, we had, new music editions, so it was a whole great thing that we did. And yeah, I've been, sub with the LA Phil, sub with different orchestras here, and yeah, and I have an academic career as well. I teach at a college out here, so that takes up a lot of my time.
yeah. Plus, you run a full-time Instagram job. I'm curious about this Kaleidoscope Chamber Orchestra. I saw a little bit of a clip, and it looked really cool. Like, how often were you guys performing?
We did about one project a month, it's like a part-time chamber orchestra. A lot of chamber orchestras are run that way, it's not like every week, but it's like once a month.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'd rehearse all week, and the rehearsals were somewhat chaotic because there was no leader, it's like everybody chiming in, and that could get a little crazy with like 50 plus people depending on the piece.
Wow.
But yeah, it was amazing, and the performances were very high energy, and we somehow worked it out. But there are some pieces that we played without a conductor that were extremely challenging, like La Mer by
Oh
Debussy,
yeah. Okay.
which is a crazy piece because every 10 measures you have a tempo change, and it's just you really need a conductor on that piece. But somehow we did it without. But it worked.
I'm interested in hearing about the leadership aspect of this because, as you're saying, there's no leader, but I mean, ultimately, somebody has to jump in and make some decisions. Like, how did that work?
There would be certain people that would tend to run things. The concertmaster obviously was more heavily involved. They tended to be more heavily involved than other people. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of a free for all in terms of if you wanted to chime in and give a suggestion, if you're playing second trombone, you could.
So, marketing wise, how were you guys? Did you have a team behind you, or were you just relying on every individual person telling their network?
We had a team and we had a budget for that. We had advertising that we did online and in print, I think. And then we would play all over Southern California, different halls. And yeah, we played Grand Central Station in Los Angeles. We played different halls throughout LA. The word got out and it was pretty successful.
That's awesome. Very cool. It's nice to see when musicians are collaborating, and I think that's also a bit of what your page is about. You're on faculty at Ventura College, and they're
Mhm.
teaching music appreciation. Is that right?
I teach music appreciation. I've taught it all really. I've taught ear training, I've taught music history, and that played a lot into this Wise Musician channel
Yeah.
because the music history aspect. When I was first starting out there, I taught music history, and then they actually had me teaching history of rock and roll, and I actually still teach that.
So as a classical musician, tell me about this. Like, how was that for you to, or was this something that you had already been interested in?
I'd already been interested in I've been a fan, I've been reading books for quite a while, but, this was the way they run things at colleges sometimes you get a last minute assignment, so I had about a week to prepare to teach a college level course. So I was studying like 6 hours a day, reading books, whatever, just figuring it out. I got pretty into it, reading tons of books. I got real into Elvis. I've been to Graceland 3 times
wow.
since.
Okay, so just for everybody listening, can you give like an overview of your Instagram account and then we'll go back to how your course content kind of flowed into the Instagram?
Yeah, the Instagram account started because as a teacher, I noticed that it was very helpful to see examples from people that are at a very high level in order to help students to know how to think and to know how to practice and whatnot. So I would take clips from interviews that I had seen that inspired me and that really I had been thinking about for years in some cases. And I would show them to these students and I got feedback on it and people said that they were really helped by seeing them
Hmm.
and they stuck in their heads as well. And so, yeah, I decided to just kind of take some of that stuff and put it online and help people online, and it seems to have worked to some extent. And, I mean, there's a lot of editing involved as well, and you really have to know what to do in terms of how to put the most interesting information at the very beginning of the video. That's a whole other thing we can get into if you want. We talk about editing,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, I know you're
yeah.
really into editing because our previous conversation that was really insightful. It's interesting how you're saying, being inspired by people at this high level, it's kind of a little throwback to your boarding school experience. Maybe there's something, a tie in there.
Yeah, I mean, it's just learning from people that are better than you, and I've always been a reader. I've read tons of musician autobiographies. That's kind of my thing. That's what I read almost exclusively is musician autobiographies. I've read dozens, maybe hundreds. I don't know. I have them all bookmarked with little bits of information. So what I'm looking for is just kind of that peek behind the curtain, like this is how this person thinks. Because a lot of books are filled with fluff or interviews are filled with fluff, things that are not so relevant, a lot of gossip, life stories or whatever that don't necessarily pertain to how people think. But once you find that little nugget of wisdom in terms of this is how this person thinks about music and being a musician, then you share that. So,
And okay, so tell me why you think your content has resonated so much. I mean, 225,000 people think that these nuggets are giving them something. How has that come to pass for you?
well, what I like to do is just kind of blow people's minds. I mean, I'm a big fan of finding that piece of information that totally shifts your thinking. Like once I hear something, it's going to completely shift how I think about a certain thing. I love encountering things like that in all different aspects of life, whether it's like politics, history, whatever, something that just totally blows away your assumptions on something. And so that's really what I look for is just the little bit of information that is just going to blow your mind. And then I put that in the first 15 seconds of a video and it seems to blow other people's minds too
Yeah.
and help them. And yeah, it resonates, but you just have to kind of trust your gut in terms of what you think is interesting and helpful for people.
Something that you posted that blew my mind was Christina Aguilera forgetting the words of the Star Spangled Banner at the Super Bowl, which I didn't know until I saw your post about it. And I really like how you're saying things that get stuck in your head, things that you think about after you see the piece of content, because we are so inundated with content. I don't know how many pieces of content we see per day. So when you have something that sticks, I think you've nailed it. Like that's where we kind of need to hang out. And so with my performances, I mean, I remember thinking last night, like, hey, if Christina can forget the words, like, I'm going to be fine. Like, she has bounced back from that and had made a huge career. And I mean, I didn't even know that about her. So the average person may not know that happened to her, although in the moment it might have been devastating. What are some of the mind blowing pieces of content that you've had recently?
I'm trying to think. Well, that's certainly one that I think about a lot. There have been ones over the past couple years since I started this in late 2022. Just certain ones about tone, about intonation. There was one that was very helpful for me to hear. Branford Marsalis, the saxophone player, um, Wynton Marsalis's brother. He, him talking about tone and changing your tone. As musicians, we think about tone a lot. How do you change your tone? And a lot of people look externally. They look to change the gear. They look to change the reed, the mouthpiece, whatever, and look to change their tone that way. But what his argument was you have to change your tone internally first, like change the how you hear
Mhm.
yourself in your head first, and then everything else will become externalized. So it's really about changing it from the inside out. And so that was one that I heard, several years ago, and that stuck with me. And I think people responded to that too.
Going back to your students, I know that your class was, like, massively successful. I think your students love you. According to Rate My Professor, you are very knowledgeable, you're really funny, you make the lectures applicable, accessible. Tell me more about, like, what was the response in the classroom?
It really depended on which class it was, but it was very helpful for them to hear, and, I heard positive feedback on it. It's really hard to tell in real time, but, you hope you're helping people and you hope to keep them engaged and just keep things moving, and, it's challenging nowadays because people have phones, and you kinda know when you're losing people is when they start to look away and look at their phones, so, you just have to keep things moving, and if you keep the energy high, they'll tend to not do that, so.
Okay, that's a good tip for me because I also teach,
Mm.
but also with Zoom courses, so then it's really easy for people to just be doing, like, 5 things at once. As a classical musician, okay, like, I know a lot of classical musicians would call themselves like, "Oh, we don't go into other genres, we don't," how have you overcome any resistance from your peers or people that, I don't know, are turned off by other genres?
Yeah, that's a thing. That's interesting. I tend to be kind of ecumenical about it, meaning like, I just think music is music, and
Yeah,
the same principles apply across the board to an extent. There are certain principles in classical music that wouldn't apply to, say, punk music or, rap, for example. But yeah, I think the basic fundamentals apply across the board, though, in terms of how to get better, how to perform, how to think about music. What is music for? Why are we making music? Who is it supposed to serve? Is it supposed to serve us, or is it supposed to serve the listener? That kind of thing.
yeah. I completely agree with you, but I think for me, it was a more like in recent years after leaving university that I started to realize this. I think somehow in our training, it was you've got like the purist, and then there's all this other stuff, and we don't go there. Or, pop music is, whatever, four chords and repetitive. So I really appreciate with your content that you're letting these artists, as you're doing, share their wisdom. And there's a lot of fundamentals that are the same, and especially the performing aspect, which I think classical musicians aren't trained in, and bringing a crowd in. We talk all the time about classical music needs more audiences. Well, then maybe we should, as performers, learn how to connect more with audiences and share the message from the stage. And I don't know, do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think people can tell when you're just trying to execute rather than say something through music. And the problem with classical music is that it's so difficult to perform. I mean, we spend our whole lives building the technique.
Yeah.
And so when you do go and perform, a lot of people tend to turn it into a technical exercise with you're just trying to execute well and do it well. Well, there's more to music than that. And so I think, learning from other genres that are perhaps a little easier to play, a little genres that are perhaps more accessible in terms of just getting into it,
Yeah.
like rock music, for example. A lot of times, you just need the three chords. And if you have something to say, you can get into it. And so learning from genres like that in terms of what do you say through music and applying that to classical music, I think is helpful for classical musicians for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And my recent experience has been learning, all of 14 Queen songs. I'm playing for Candlelight and ABBA and a lot of pop stuff and film music and all of these genres that I previously hadn't really touched or explored. And then just recognizing that there's so much value, and I have so much respect for these artists, especially when you hear, as you're saying, about their lives and what they were putting into their art, and the lyrics and the heart and the message behind it and how they were connecting with people, and yeah, why we're doing this anyway.
Yeah, it's a transfer of energy.
Hmm.
And that applies to social media too. When you create a post, you're transferring your energy to other people through the internet, through Instagram or whatever. And so if there's no energy behind what you post, then it's not going to resonate with people. I really do feel that way. And people can tell, I think, if you're faking it or copying someone else, can tell. So,
I've never heard anyone describe it like that. Tell me more about this energy transfer, and how have you discovered this?
well, I've heard other people talk about it, but I mean, it's just what I've noticed. If you're not into it, people can just tell. It's like your post is like it's tentacles reaching out through the internet to other people, to other people's eyes. And it's really just like you're putting your energy into it. So if you don't put your passion into it, then it's going to be very noticeable. So I think, just make things that you're interested about
Mhm.
and start there. I think you have to be interested. I mean, that's where I start with all these posts. It's just, what am I into right now?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it comes from like, what book am I reading right now? What interview did I watch that I resonated with? But a lot of times it starts with books. What book am I reading right now that's really resonating with me? And then I want to share that with people and I'm really into it. And then I have a lot of energy behind it and I make a post about it. And then that resonates with people.
I love that. So beautiful. So what are you reading right now?
What am I reading right now? There's the Beatles engineer Jeff Emerick. He wrote a book, and I tend to read those anything to do with music, autobiography related. So
Okay.
I've read them all different genres.
We'll get your top 5
Yeah.
and put them in the show notes for all of our listeners. Sending energy. Okay, so what kind of energy do you get back? I know you have tons of comments, people thanking you on your posts. What is some of the response that you're getting?
I get messages, I get responses in the comments. People share them with comments that they themselves make on the post, things like that. You can just feel it to a certain extent.
But you also have some pretty interesting followers you wanna share.
I do, yeah. I mean, you have celebrities. I have celebrities following me, people like Pharrell Williams, Justin Timberlake shared one of my posts even, he follows me, John Mayer. John Mayer is just really into music, you can tell, so he follows all pages that are similar to mine. Hillary Hahn,
Oh,
you
really?
know,
Okay.
yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I use her as a
yeah, use her as a model, right? She's amazing.
yeah, as an example in my entrepreneurship class because she started the 100 Days of Practice challenge where she shows her process, and I'm trying to encourage other musicians, like, let yourself be seen before it's perfect. You'll build an audience that way, you get better that way, and if you don't believe me, look at Hillary Hahn because she's doing it. She's got the following.
It's really an inspiration that she lets herself be vulnerable in front of people. She just takes a camera and she no makeup on. She's just like, in the morning practicing and she's putting herself on camera and not sounding like she does in a concert hall. It's just amazing. So
I completely agree with you, and
yeah.
I don't know why there's such a stigma around sharing when I mean, I can't imagine how vulnerable she feels, but at the same time, the way that she does it looks effortless. It looks like it's very natural for her to do so. So it's a great inspiration for a lot of us who feel uncomfortable putting ourselves out there.
Certainly is.
Speaking of putting yourself out there, up until now, you've been an anonymous account. Do you want to talk about that and share a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is just not messing with what works. So what I did in the beginning was just put these out there and it seemed to work. So I was confused. Should I change it or should I just keep doing what I'm doing? And just tried to keep doing what I'm doing. And I'm still doing that to an extent, but I think, at a certain point, you get to a point where it's just you've done the same thing for such a long time and you can only watch things go viral so much where it's just like, okay, and now what happens next? And it's weird because you never know what's going to go viral.
Yeah.
And so I think that's important too, is just keep putting stuff out there and you never know what's going to resonate. Like some of them I posted where I was just like, this is just a cop out. Like I'm just kind of putting something together really quickly and sorry, I got to do this, but I'm going to publish it anyway because I just got to get it out there because of consistency. And then it gets a million views and you're like, whoa, okay, that's weird, but just happens.
Have you figured out kind of a formula or why some things work and others don't? Or
I mean, sometimes you can really generally tell when it's gonna go viral, sometimes, but generally you can't, but a lot of times you can tell when you found something really good if the information just is so impactful in the first 5, 6 seconds. Like, it really has to catch your eye and your ear in the first 5 seconds or less, really 3 seconds. If it can blow your mind in that amount of time, then it's gonna hold people. A lot of times when it's that slow introduction, like it takes like a while to get into it, then people will just scroll away and you can tell it's not gonna go viral. So it's putting the most important and impactful thing in the very beginning. And the technique I use is watching. You could do this with your podcast, for example, watch through the whole thing and then leave, go do something else, go for a walk, whatever, and try to take note of what am I still thinking about half hour later, what is staying with me? What's kind of running through my head still? And then that is the thing that people will resonate with pretty much always. So that's the thing that I'll take and then put it out there.
I love that. Yeah, I know editing is really important too. Also consistency. You were sharing with me earlier your strategy around that.
Yeah, it's so important. I think these algorithms program themselves around consistency. So if you're not consistent, they forget about you. And actually, if you are consistent, but then you stop being consistent, they will reset you, and then you have to start pretty much from the beginning. So what I've done is I've been consistent this entire time. I mean, I started this about less than 2 years ago, and I've never missed. At the beginning, I was posting every day of the week,
Okay.
and that obviously became too much. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to pick 2 days out of the week, which are Mondays and Thursdays. And at 8 a.m. Pacific time, that's very important. And I've never missed once. I've been on vacation in Europe. I've been in Istanbul, posting from like a cafe. And I mean, there's incentive, right? Because when you start building it, then you're like, okay, I don't want to lose all this, right? And so then you're not going to miss.
What is the reward for you in this?
Well, when you see the numbers coming in, you don't want that to go away.
Hmm.
You just want to keep the momentum going and see where it leads. So yeah, it's just very important to never miss. And what I said about earlier about the specific time that you post, 8 a.m., I think that's very important too, because I really do feel like, and I could be wrong on this, but I feel like it is a thing. These algorithms look for a very specific time. So if you always post at 8 a.m. and then suddenly you post like 5 hours later one time, that it will deduct you in the algorithm. And I've noticed that too, because one time I was trying to make a post, my phone was glitching. I had to go to work. I couldn't do it for 4 hours. And then I did manage to get it posted, but it was about 4.5 hours late. And that video severely underperformed.
Hmm.
So I do think that you have to be extremely consistent. Just make a post and schedule it. You can do that on Instagram, schedule it and release it the exact same time, the exact same day, like clockwork. And you're going to grow.
Okay, I love that. I'm definitely going to apply all this. What kind of influence and impact do you think that you're making? And I mean, I know the numbers are exciting, but it's more than that. It's knowing that you're having such a difference. You're making such a difference in the minds of people. Like, how is that for you?
I love helping people, and I think that's what it's all about. I think when you play music too, you should try to help people. It shouldn't be just about your ego. It should be about helping people and transferring music through you out into an audience. So I think that applies to this as well. I mean, I've heard a lot of great feedback from people. And yeah, I just want to help them grow because these are the things that I wish I had heard earlier
Mm,
in my life in terms of how to think on stage, how to think in terms of growth, how to think in terms of just why am I a musician?
yeah.
A lot of people don't even know why they're a musician. They do it because of fame or to look good on stage or whatever. And
Yeah.
really what I've discovered through listening to great people like Quincy Jones or whatever, it's not about you. It's about the music and you're just a vessel in a sense. So things like that and just thinking correctly, it makes all the difference.
I just want to highlight what you're saying because that helps me personally so much too when I walk on stage and I know this isn't about me. This is about creating an experience for everyone in the room to enjoy something that unifies us. One interesting thing last night, the France elections were happening and the results were actually released during my show. So I was very aware that there's a lot of division in the room, probably. And yet, all 200 of us are sitting here united around music that they love. And that was such an interesting thought for me to have. And they weren't allowed to look at their phone. They all had to wait half an hour after the election results were out. And just thinking of like, yeah, music is something that unifies us. I love what you said about classical musicians don't know why they're musicians a lot of time, probably. For me, it was always like, well, I just started and then I kept going, just never stopped. I don't know the fame aspect that you mentioned really counts for the average classical musician because a lot of us aren't there.
Well, what do you think about when you're performing? I mean, what's going through your head?
I mean, it's what you said already. It's sending energy and
Hmm.
it's giving and serving and creating space for people to receive and enjoy. And, I tell them at the beginning, make yourself at home. This is a moment for you to rest and to get a break from your life. And, you're here for an hour and you're going to you're having thoughts. I tell a lot of stories in between because I want them to think of the people that they love. I relate a lot of the lyrics because I'm playing a lot of pop music now. So I talk a lot about the stories in the lyrics, or I share personal stories about my family who's in Canada and I'm over here in Europe playing. And that really resonates with people. And maybe through your content too, when there's this story and this human aspect coming through, I mean, there's got to be a reason why your account is connecting with so many people.
Yeah, people can tell.
Hmm.
Like I said, and they can tell when you're being real and when you're not being real.
So for you, because you haven't yourself been on your page, it's like you're using the wisdom of the artist, but in an authentic way because you're editing it according to what stuck out to you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just I'm not sure how interested people would be in me as a bassoon player. Maybe they would, but yeah, things that resonate and things that have helped me think correctly and sharing that. So, and writing original captions and doing original edits and thinking about it in an original way from an original angle.
Hmm.
I've made it a real strong point to not repost other people's stuff
Okay.
and just in terms of their edits. When you do see one go viral, like if I'll do one that really does resonate, and then you start looking through Instagram, you'll see like 6 different accounts posting it, the same thing, my video basically, or the video I edited. A lot of accounts build themselves around that.
Okay.
I mean, that's okay, but I just decided to not do it that way and
Hmm.
make it all original.
Does that bother you as a creator to see other people kind of steal your work or?
I mean, not really. You wanna get credited, so I try to credit people when I take a video from, if I when I use a video to make one of my reels, I'll credit them as much as I possibly can, and I think that's what it's about, just credit people, and they'll be appreciative to get the attention.
I noticed with your captions, I really like how you point things out in the video through the writing and especially your own thoughts on it. You'll specifically say when you find something interesting or inspiring or what about it. And I think that's such a beautiful way that you've embraced the role as an educator, not just in your classroom, but now online, because you're teaching people what to pay attention to. And that's really a gift and what people need. Because, again, we can talk all day about classical music is dying and we need more audiences, but I'm always saying, well, maybe we need to educate more people about what to listen to and for so that they can find their way in it. How do you view your role as an educator in this?
Well, especially when it comes to classical music, if a lot of people assume that you need to have education to even get into it. My argument is that just go and listen to the awesomeness of it and absorb the sound and forget about having to know something before you get there. Thanks for putting that out in terms of the captions because honestly, you never know if anybody reads them or I kind of assume that nobody's going to read them. I just put them out there and I write them. And a lot of times it's if I'm reading a book on someone and I make a reel on them, then I'll take parts of that book and put it in the captions and different quotes in there that are helpful.
Mhm.
And yeah, just kind of elaborate on the video and talk about it and why it's important. And
Yeah, and I think that's what connects the dots for people who are coming onto your page and we can hear the artist talk, but then you make it relatable and that's how people can kind of get connected. So, with your new content shift where I think the idea is that you're going to appear more on the page and teach with your own video, right?
I have a lot of things that I've written and thoughts on practicing how to grow. Intonation, especially, is one that I'm really into. I don't know, that's kind of specific, but things like that. So there are a lot of real ideas that I have. I'm not sure to what extent my face is going to be in there. It's probably going to be in there a little bit, but we're going to talk about just practicing. I'm a big believer in efficient practicing. How efficient can you be, not wasting time? I've delved into that a lot recently. The 80-20 rule. 80% of your practicing is probably a waste of time.
Yeah, isn't that comforting to all
So
of our listeners?
take the 20% that really is great and really helps you improve and only do that. And then move on to different things. So a system that I've devised recently is creating a list of all your weaknesses and working on them for sometimes only 1 minute a day, but 5 minutes a day, maybe, and going down the list and realizing that you're most effective during that first 1, 2, 3 minutes. If you work on something for 15 minutes or half an hour, the curve starts to go down in terms of the efficiency with which you're practicing. You're going to be concentrated for the first 5 minutes, but you're going to definitely lose concentration 15 minutes in, and then it becomes just a waste of time.
What are some of your 20% strategies?
So for example, on bassoon, double tonguing is a thing,
Mhm.
vibrato is a thing, intonation. So I have this entire list of, for example, double tonguing, and I'll work on that for a minute, and I have a timer, and I have a metronome that's set up to maximize that minute. So I just double tongue really fast for a minute and then move on to the next skill, which might be vibrato. And I found that if you do that every single day and you're consistent, just like on The Wise Musician, if you're consistent, you will improve with a minute a day.
Hmm.
It's very interesting, but yeah.
Okay,
So
I totally am with you. I've heard that switching tasks so quickly you can lose energy in the switch. Do you find that or
if the switch is efficient though, then you're going to be good.
okay.
It depends. Yeah, I do agree with you to an extent because a lot of times if you do switch tasks, you're gonna be distracted and get on your phone or lose energy in terms of focus. I don't know if you've used this timer called Seconds Pro. People use it at the gym. It has, like, these screens on it, and so it will flash go, and then when it's done, it will ring really, really loudly and then give you about 30 seconds in between to switch to the next skill, and then you get to the next skill, and then you start doing it.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, it's a great app. It's called Seconds Pro. Check it out.
You know what? I
So,
have improved
yeah.
so much, and I think it is this 1% better every day. It's something that I'm really trying because 'cause I've been playing the same programs now for a couple years with some of them. And so, thankfully to Instagram and Facebook, it's like, "Here's your 1 year ago today memory," and it'll be me playing the same piece, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm way better now," because you just don't know, right? Like, time goes by and you hope, but then I've got proof. So I don't share any of those old videos.
It's really hard listening to and there's also this thing about and as you age, it's like you start to get into these mental ticks where it's like, "Oh, was I better before?"
Do you know who I just heard talking about this actually? Tim Ferriss had Stephen Pressfield on his podcast, and I know you'll know who Stephen Pressfield is because he wrote The War on Art. And Tim literally asked this question. He said, "Stephen, I feel like I've written my best books. My best days are behind me." And Stephen was like, "Yeah, that's resistance. That's just the voice of resistance. So ignore it and get to work. Sit down and put in your hours." And Steven's thing is that he sits down and writes for 2 hours and doesn't judge it, doesn't think about it, and then goes on with his day, and he knows he's overcome resistance for that day. I know you know this, but it was such an interesting concept for me. Like, "Oh, Tim, thank you for being vulnerable on your podcast for the rest of us listening."
That's amazing that he would say that.
I know. He literally used the podcast as kind of a coaching session for him, which makes me feel better
Mhm.
because, I had Chris from Honesty Pill on recently, and he was talking about being efficient in practicing like you're sharing too. And I think all of my insecurities came out. I'm like, "But and what if I should be doing 5 hours a day?" And I was listening back like, "Oh, Michelle, like, you use this as, like, a personal coaching." But yeah, it might maybe helps other people.
Yeah, he's great on that stuff too in terms of just not wasting time.
Mhm.
Counting hours is a huge trap too.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. You get distracted by all the stuff that we have to do, but I like this idea that you have of being so precise about what exactly am I trying to accomplish.
Yeah, it really depends on the skill. Like, if it is it the main thing you're working on that day, then yes, you should work more than a minute on it, of course, or 5 minutes even. But if it's the skills that you need to maintain, the skills on the side that you're still trying to improve, the little tiny micro skills, I call them, then yeah, a minute a day, if you do them every day, that's the catch. You got to do them every day. And if you do them every day for a minute or 5 minutes or 3 minutes, yeah, you will improve over time.
Mhm, mhm.
So it's that recall aspect too. I mean, you remember things better when you can recall them. And that's the test to see if you really do know them. So you actually learn through recall. So yeah, it's just recalling them every day too.
Like muscle memory.
Yeah,
The consistent improvement over time with your Instagram. So have you noticed that you're getting better at this, that it's easier for you, you come up with ideas quicker? Like, how's that been for you?
for sure. You get better at editing. You get better at definitely coming up with ideas, definitely better at writing and putting it out there. But it's hard to tell sometimes. The thing is that the metric that you're using to prove if you're getting better or not, I guess, what would that be? Views? The thing about views is they can fluctuate.
Mm,
So, for example, we're in the summer right now. I really do feel like there's a lull in the summer and there's a marked lull during the winter holidays, Christmas and New Year's.
mhm.
So you're going to get a lot less views during and the month of January for some reason. So you can still be improving, but not notice the improvement because of reasons like that.
Right.
So
Is there another metric
yeah,
that you would use, like an engagement metric?
comments for sure,
Yeah.
shares. Yeah, generally views though is the main one. You never know what's going to resonate. So you just got to put stuff out there.
And is that the approach that you're gonna be taking now that you're gonna be more front facing on the account?
It seems like it. Yeah. You just keep putting it out.
I mean, so what is, the message that you want to come from you? Is it gonna be like, "Hey, here's what I think about these great artists," or is it also like, "Here's what I've learned through my expertise and my years and all the books that you've read," and
That's both.
Mhm.
And just trying to help people through everything I know. I mean, I feel like I've learned a lot. I've, studied this for decades and read a ton of books and I write a lot and just trying to help people that I guess maybe are a couple steps behind me or even people that are ahead of me and maybe thinking about it in a different way. So,
Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of collaboration is that you can share different angles of the same subject and learn.
yeah, I mean, I've really just tried to be an informer and an educator, maybe not as much as an entertainer. There are a lot of accounts that do that, but I guess that's not my role.
Mhm.
That work for a lot of people, but I've tried to stay away from the entertainment aspect of it and just focus on informing and helping people grow.
Well, I think you let the content speak for itself. Like, I mean, these artists are entertaining in their own right because they're big names that you're sharing. So I think in the same way that you were mentioning earlier, being a vessel for the music to flow through us, it's like you're giving these artists space and letting what they have to say just by editing it for clarity.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it takes, I'll watch an interview that's an hour long of somebody talking and find nothing, or an hour long and find just maybe a few seconds of something that's interesting.
Mhm.
So it's really the tip of the spear of the most interesting possible thing I can find at the very front of the video. And you edit it again in a way where you put the very most interesting thing in the very first 5 seconds of the video.
Mhm.
And especially the first 15 seconds, that's the most important thing. Because on Instagram, there's that fold where if somebody shares it on a story, it goes away in 15 seconds. So you have to get everything interesting in that first 15 seconds or the most enough to keep them to keep watching, right?
Yes, I know about that 15-second story problem.
Yeah. Well, one other thing I was gonna say is I don't know if you've seen this YouTuber Casey Neistat. He has this massive YouTube channel. He's like a content creator, and he's not a musician, but I'm not too into him in terms of his content. I've seen a few of his videos, but one thing I heard him say, which was extremely interesting, was that when he makes a video and when he edits a video, he looks down into the 1/10 of a second. You can do that actually on Premiere Pro. You can zoom into 1/10 of a second. And what he does is try to make sure that there's no empty space, even down to 1/10 of a second. So if it's not moving within even 1/10 of a second, it's going to lose people. So you have to really think of it at a micro level like that. Like if there's a lot of empty space in the video or nothing's happening or it's not moving, people will scroll away. It's like lizard brain. Got to keep it moving. So
Okay, so question for you, like, is that something that you only see in short form video content? Because, what about podcasts? There's a lot of empty space. People are having a conversation, there's pauses. Should we chop all that out? Or do you let it kind of breathe organically?
on a podcast, leave it in for sure. But on a short form video, or if you're doing a YouTube video like the style he's talking about, yeah, you want to keep it moving.
Yeah.
But on a short form video, it's a whole different thing. It's a whole brain way to look at it. You have to think of people aren't even thinking, they're just looking at it and they're deciding at an instinctual level whether to keep watching it or they're going to keep moving. So it has to catch them right away.
Hmm.
Like before they even listen to it, it's like what they see, almost. So when you make short form video, if you want to grow that way, cut out all the empty space, cut out the stuff that's not so relevant. Be ruthless with the editing.
Awesome. I've been thinking about some videos of mine that have performed better. And I think it is because I went in and I was like, all right, this isn't necessary. But it's like, oh, but I thought it was funny. It's like, yeah, but I think, we're trying to always create for the viewer and the clarity of the messaging.
And if the most interesting thing happens later in the video, take that and edit it and put it in the front.
Love that. So I keep saying so often that you want to help people. What's the future of Wise Musician? Do you see yourself as a mentor to 225,000 people? How do you want to help them further? Are you going to grow your community in a more inner circle kind of way? And what do you want to bring people into?
Yeah, I have various ideas. I have things that I've written. I'm going to put some material out there. The hope is to start a podcast,
Okay.
meaning start creating original videos where I'm interviewing the person because I find with a lot of interviews, a lot of the questions are fluff or meaningless. And I just want to really focus in on how do you think? How do you get better? How do you practice? How do you hear yourself inside your head? That kind of thing, really like focused questions.
Yeah. I think that's a great place to start because you've watched hundreds and hundreds of hours of interviews. So you know what you like and what works. And then you can bring that into your own content.
So if you have any questions, contact me through The Wise Musician. But yeah, I mean, one thing I want to say about making content online is just trust your gut and trust what resonates with you
Mhm.
and don't do something that doesn't resonate with you. And if you trust your gut and if you find it extremely interesting, there's a really good chance that somebody else will too.
Hmm.
So
Mhm. That's awesome. Nick, I
Mhm.
want to thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your approach to this and how you've reached so many people. I think what you're doing is awesome. I mean, I was looking through your followers before this call, and there's so many people that, my followers, and it's just like you've created this beautiful community. So I hope to see the podcast come out really soon. And I hope to hear more of the teaching that you give from you, because I think you have so much to offer. So everyone can follow you at wise_musician, right?
I'm on YouTube as well. It's not as big, but I'm on YouTube through there as well. The plan on YouTube is to start creating other videos, but as of now, I kind of cross post them on YouTube, so you could look there.
And if
Yeah.
you had to share one action point, what would you tell our listeners to do?
I would say create something that inspires you and be extremely consistent, ruthlessly consistent, and never miss,
Never
just
miss.
like you do when you practice.
Okay.
Um, since everything when you practice, think of content creation the same way. Just never miss, and the world will start to work in your favor when you do that.
Cool.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm gonna do it. Thanks so much, Nick. This is awesome. For everybody listening, if you
Well,
have enjoyed, then I want you to screenshot this episode and share it to your stories, and we'll reshare. Thanks for being here, Nick, and we look forward to seeing a lot more of you on your own podcast.
it's been amazing being with you. Thanks so much.